Hello and welcome to the Knights of Lorcana, an online league where players battle it head-to-head to prove that they are the best and the best as they climb up the leaderboard. Now, with that being said, we are 3 weeks in and going strong with 54 competitors. That's a lot, but at the same time, it's been an absolute thrill to be able to see what kind of decks people bring and more importantly, what kind of games they're able to deliver. And man, it has not disappointed at all, especially now. As we go into the leaderboard, this is how it is looking and it is going absolutely thrillingly. As you can see, we do have a great deal of people who have fought their way to the top and been able to maintain some pretty impressive scores. And at the same time, you do see that a TommyDoo is up there just as well. One of the best that we have in this league. And right now, he is going against a Mute who has had a little bit of a struggle, but all in all is a very skilled player. And right now, sitting at 2-3 for himself, he is doing well, though, with his Amethyst Steel and has had some pretty impressive wins as he's been able to go about this league. Now, at the same time, he is still looking to bring and break even on a 3-3 going against TommyDoo, which is going to be no easy feat because right now, TommyDoo is a 3-0 player and showing off his skills with a Sapphire Steel deck. Now, that's absolutely something that is going to need to be watched, but don't count out Mute just because of his score. It is anyone's game, and the decks will tell the story for us as these players battle it out to prove they got what it takes to remain this high on the leaderboard. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. So with that being said, both players have just about finished cutting their decks and playing their game. Now, of course, like we have said, TommyDoo is going to be on the left-hand side with Mute being on the right. And I mean, the thing with Mute too is he is a very skilled Amethyst Steel player and is opting to go first here, inking a Chernobog follower for a Maleficent. Now, keep in mind that a Maleficent is a 1/1 able to quest for 2, so while it is an easy target to be able to take out, it is still a very scary card because once it quests even once, that does a lot of job to get you closer to that 20, and it seems like right there, a Popsicle is coming out with a Gantu, revealing his true colors. And so right now, Mute knows exactly what he is going against, and vice versa. Except, you know, it's a good chance that maybe TommyDoo does not know his second color, but I mean, it might be a good safe bet to guess, especially now that he has inked a Strength of a Raging Fire to play a Chernobog follower. Now, a Maleficent is going to be questing for 2 and looking to pass it back. Now, the nice thing about Chernobog follower, and one of the biggest things that you need to do with this Amethyst Steel deck is try to keep up your card draw. If you start running into card draw problems, this deck will almost defeat itself, which is something that you got to be very careful about. And at the same time, TommyDoo is going to be playing a very tight game as he goes ahead and inks a Captain Hook to be able to play a Calhoun. Now, an absolutely great play right there. Able to gain 2 lore whenever it banishes a character in a challenge, which Maleficent might be a very prime target to be able to do that. So it'll be interesting, but I mean, at the same time, that's going to be encouraging a Chernobog follower to quest, pop, and draw a card, which it looks like, yep, that is going to be what Mute ends up doing. And now Mute has been actually a very skilled player, and if you ever do see and play on Pixelborn, you have a pretty good chance of actually running into him. He's on a pretty consistent basis as a Peak gets played out for ink. One thing that'd be awesome is a Calhoun for a Calhoun, but in this case, it looks like it's going to be a Lawrence, and he's going to potentially even pass it back. He might. I mean, that's the hard part, though. Do you pass back, or do you just say, hey, go ahead, take out this Maleficent. We're just going to go for the trade. I'm going to go up to 5. You're going to go to 2. I'm okay with that trade. And these are the kinds of questions that you need to be asking yourself while you are going against an opponent like this. And in this case, it does look like that we do have, he did opt to keep the Maleficent safe. Now, that's something that's very interesting, too, especially going against a Steel deck, because Steel has an ample amount of removal. But right now, we're getting a bigger and bigger clue as to what kind of deck that TommyDoo does end up playing. And he's playing a slower Amethyst Steel deck. Now, this one tries to go more on the ramping side to be dominant in the late game. And so necessarily, while yes, this is going to be slowing down TommyDoo a little bit, it might not for the long haul, because now he's going to be able to quest for 4 potentially. And you know, the Calhoun's only going to be able to take out one of the 2, while the Lawrence will be able to trade in later. Now, here we go, going in with a Genie coming out onto the field after inking a White Rose, being able to draw a card. Now, that's going to be a good thing, but at the same time, your opponent could very well have a Zeus in hand being at soon-to-be 5 ink, and he is going to quest with all 4, going up to 7. And I mean, that's the thing. Once you start getting this deck going, Amethyst Steel can just move so fast in its climb to 20. And so that's just going to be something that you're going to need to keep in mind, especially on a slower deck. That's going to be very difficult for you to be able to maintain. The more that you ramp, while yes, that is nice, if you're unable to get ahead of your opponent, that's going to be so difficult to be able to do. And an absolutely beautiful play of playing Tinkerbell, dealing 1 damage to every character. And now the Calhoun will be able to go in and take out the Lawrence with no loss, as Lawrence is unable to deal any damage as long as he has a damage counter on him. So Calhoun gets the free kill, goes up 2 ink, or 2 lore, and we are none the wiser for it. Now at the same time, is he going to give himself the 2 lore that Calhoun earned, and rightfully so? And so right now, though, we are going over to Mute playing his game. He's going to be questing for 2 and then singing a Zeus onto the Tinkerbell. Now that's a great turn as well, because Tinkerbell has the ability that anytime it does go ahead and take out an opponent's character, it can deal 2 damage to another one. And now also going for a goat is going to be a great turn, and being able to move even closer to getting to that 20. Meaning we're going to be seeing a Pete going out and a pass 2. And so right now, a Hiram is going to be coming out, popping the popsicle to be able to draw 2 cards without really too much ink spent, only 4, going to have 3 left potentially, right? 3 left to be able to use some things. Also, if he decides to go ahead and ink something with the Fishbone Quill, could be a good answer to continue to get more cards out onto the battlefield. Now with a 2-popper, he's going to be going for a Visions of the Future, drawing 5 cards and being able to pick any of those 5 to go into his hand. So that's going to be a pretty good bonus right there, as he goes ahead and adds 1 to hand and the rest to the bottom. Now this is going to be a big deal, because Alstorian has gone ahead and had a pretty good advantage so far in the game, especially with an evasive Genie being untouchable. The only thing at this point that could very well take it out would be a Zeus, which could be possible, but at the same time, that's going to be a little bit difficult. A Fortifier is coming out, though, to be able to get a card in hand. And, again, the option of the Fishbone Quill being able to go up to 8 ink is a possibility, but at the same time, you already got a good amount of ink, so you don't necessarily need to overextend yourself with a small hand in order to get more ink to be able to utilize. So that's going to be something that you're going to have to keep in mind as you continue to play this game. Even still, though, TommyDoo is getting further and further behind, and there's very little that he's going to be able to do. Now, at the same time, are you okay with a goat going ahead? There's the 2 finally added. Are you okay, though, with a goat gaining an extra lore and then having the Calhoun take it out for 2 lore? That's a good question to be able to ask, and wondering what then you can be able to do to get this taken care of. Because right now, a 6 ink or a 6 lore difference is going to be a big deal. But right there, right now, that is a difficult situation, as the Hiram is going to be going in and tapped, and then going to be taken out by both the GOAT and the Elsa. And I mean, Elsa is just such a critical card in these decks, being able to do some great board removal that otherwise just isn't possible. Being able to exert things, and because this Elsa is evasive even, it can take out some pretty great targets easily. The 5 cost does hurt, though, but being a 2/5 is a great addition to the deck, and there is so much utilization that it can have. Now, at the same time, another Tinkerbell coming out, dealing 1 damage to everything again. And I mean, that'll take out pretty much everything. Now, the Calhoun can only attack into the GOAT, as both other characters are evasive. I mean, still, though, do you trade that 2 lore? The GOAT's going to gain 1. And I mean, at the same time, yep, that looks like the trade is going to happen. GOAT gaining 1 lore, and I mean, still gaining 3 with all evasive characters. That's pretty scary. And with 2 cards in hand, there still are a lot of options that Mute could possibly utilize, especially now having 3, that he could go ahead and use. Now, of course, at this point, a Rabbit is going to be coming out, drawing a card, and he has 1 ink to be able to play with. Now, what kind of answers could that entail? Well, we're about to see. But right now, this game for Mute has been rather dominant, just because TommyDoo has had a slower deck play, and now the lore difference is up to 10. And I'm going to have to say that this is going to be a big turn for TommyDoo. If he is unable to really start getting control of these evasive characters, it's going to be almost too little too late to be able to get back into this game. I mean, sure, the Tinkerbell might be able to sing something that could be utilized well to take out one of the characters, but unless you're able to actually do something to get control of this board, this game is very well going to go into Mute's hands and give him a win that he desperately needs. But still, right there, going wide like that, not too shabby. Not going to be able to play actions due to the Pete, and then gaining a lot of lore with the Smee coming out. And it looks like, yep, the Tinkerbell is going to be gaining 2 lore. And now Tinkerbell does have a great amount of willpower, but at the same time, it's like, you just kind of race your opponent to the finish, because right now you got 6 lore on TommyDoo's side that could go up to 12, but you're threatening game at this point, and so you're sitting kind of pretty, being able to gain 4 lore going up to 18, and 2 of the characters can't even be attacked. And this entire game, even though TommyDoo has had cards in hand that could be utilized to necessarily take out your opponent's characters, that has yet to really be seen. With so many cards that Tommy's been able to have, there have been, next to no removal drawn for him, which is a little scary, as next turn he might only have 1 answer. And so we're curious to see what Mute is going to be playing, and it looks like a Crab is going to be played, going into the Rabbit to go ahead and take out the Tinkerbell in a trade, then drawing a card from Rabbit. And man, Crabs can absolutely be a dominant force when it comes to getting control of the board state. Being able to send even a Rabbit in is an absolutely great trade, especially because you get to draw a card immediately after Rabbit gets removed and banished from the game. Even if it doesn't get banished and gets bounced back, you're still able to draw the card. As long as it leaves the board, boom, you get a card. And so we see a lot of people bouncing things back all the time with Rabbit and things like that, just to be able to get that card draw. And another White Rose going up to 18, and now game is threatened on the board multiple ways, either with the ready characters or with the exerted characters that have evasive. This game is pretty much going to be tied into Mute's hand. And I mean, right now, TommyDoo is going to be digging a little deeper here, trying to get some answers. I mean, there's a good chance that, no, not even a grab your swords is going to even utilize this. And yep, it looks like TommyDoo is going to be scooping up his hand, and that game is going to go to Mute. And with that being said, we are starting game 2 as a White Rose is being inked and a card is going out. Now, at the same time, we saw a TommyDoo who inked a card and opted to go first, and rightfully so. He needs the ability to ramp and be that 1 turn ahead to be able to get ahead in this situation. And so right now he is going to be utilizing with the Calhoun. Any questing is going to gain 2 lore. And that's the hard part. A Diablo is such a great card, being able to quest and gain 1, and then whenever it is banished, you are able to then go ahead and gain a card, no matter how it leaves the board. As long as it is banished, you draw a card. But still, gain a card for a Calhoun gaining 2, that might hurt a little bit. But at the same time, as long as we can see some really good ramp going our way, there might be a good chance that, it could go very well into Mute's future. But he's got to play fast, because as soon as TommyDoo starts to get that crazy ramp going for him and is able to get into that mid to late game, this tide can severely change into TommyDoo's future and get some great wins going his way. And we already are seeing that with the Fishbone Quill. And what's interesting is he inked a Hiram. And normally what that tells me is that the opponent has another Hiram in hand, because you don't necessarily need 2 in hand. But still, at the same time, if you don't have a ton of items, you might, be looking for, in that case, a out and just trying to get as much lore as possible. And so right now, though, they're going to be going in and questing for 3 and saying, hey, I'm perfectly fine with a trade with either a Smee. And if you even don't take out the Smee and you go ahead for the Diablo, but then the dreaded Fox coming into play. Now, this is going to be a threatening key right here. Now, of course, at the same time, Calhoun into a Smee necessarily isn't a bad move at all either. That does feel like a pretty good trade. Sure, the Calhoun does get taken out, but it does take out a pretty big threat. And at the same time, it looks like the Fishbone Quill is going to be used to go ahead and put something out onto the field. and a Fortis Field to add a card to hand. And one thing that I love about Fortis Sphere, and one thing that I'm sad that it doesn't get utilized a little bit more, is that Fortis Sphere has the ability to pay one, sack it, and then you are able to give any character on your field bodyguard. But normally it is just used to draw cards, especially with Hiram, and it is such a great card for that reason, being able to be played, draw a card, and then it gets discarded, and you draw 2 cards with Hiram's effect. I mean, just can't go wrong there. And inking a Smee, does that necessarily feel good? Not necessarily, because Smee just can absolutely put in work. But still, when you're trying to ramp up as high as you can, that can do way more for you in the later game because ink is power. If you don't have a lot of ink, there's not a lot that you can do. And we saw firsthand that TommyDoo did struggle towards the late game last time, and that is very difficult to do. But right now, Fishbone Quill has put in a lot of work for itself. And so there's a very good chance that at this point, the Hiram might even sack it. And even still, there's a good chance that he might be able to even use it one more time if he so chooses and then draw 2 more cards off of it and then quest with the Hiram to be able to draw 2 cards. And so right now, Mute needs to build up his board a little bit better. Now, he still, of course, has a Diablo in hand. That's not too bad, but he's going to be inking the Diablo. And then going for a goat, gaining 1 lore. And building up 2 characters now that have 4 attack in, and he's going to be questing with the Fox, and almost rightfully so. Why are you afraid of really what they're able to put out? There's not a whole lot of things that they necessarily can put out. With Sapphire Steel, there is really no rush in this deck, and so that's pretty easy to say that, hey, I'm going to go ahead and quest, especially if they have removal. Then that's going to be necessarily something that you are going to be worried about if they Zeus or Smash or, something along those lines to be able to take out some of your board. The Fox being only having 3 willpower, that's pretty easy to then take out. Ooh, but a double Captain Hook. Now, does that necessarily feel great? No, not really, but the ability that it has to be able to then go in and have Challenger +2, that can be a pretty big difference, especially because now you can go ahead and send both of the Captain Hooks into 2 characters that have 4 attack, which can be an absolute game changer. And we see a McDuck Manor coming onto the battlefield, and I mean, we've seen just how much McDuck Manor can put in work, and so the fact that it is back onto the field is pretty scary. Now, at the same time, if we see another Fox in hand, for example, then the McDuck Manor is pretty much going to just be taken out. But if not, right now, both characters can only deal 8 damage to the McDuck Manor. Again, though, too, if a crab does come out as well, then the McDuck Manor will be taken out by both attacks, and then both Captain Hooks would take out the other 2. And that necessarily doesn't feel too bad, because then you would also have a crab on the field, which could also be pretty good. And so I'm curious to see what's going to be happening. So this is going to be kind of almost a difficult situation to be able to undertake here, just with the amount of answers that you might be able to have in an Amethyst Steel deck. It's definitely something that you need to keep in mind as you try to navigate this as carefully as possible, because as you can tell, and if anyone has played Lorcana knows, if you do make a mistake, a misplay, as we call them, that this can really turn the game around and make it very difficult for characters or for players to be able to make it back into this game. But singing a Zeus is a very interesting choice, and then going into the McDuck Manor to take it out. And that's something that's really awesome about Along Came Zeus, is that it has the ability to deal 5 damage to a character or location. And that's something that you have to be very mindful of with the reading, because a lot of times we just think that it means a character. But no, Zeus's lightning will take out anything and everything in its path. 5 damage. And so, I mean, just another great turn right there. No damage used, and right now, another Maleficent coming out, and we saw Maleficent put in some serious work last game. Now, at the same time, though, those Captain Hooks are staring down that Fox and that Goat pretty temptingly, and it's going to be a little interesting to see if you do go for those trades. I really do think that that's a great trade. While it does certainly hurt your board state a little bit, but it's 2 for 2. And you only spent 2 lore to be able to get, or 2 ink to be able to get both these characters out, to take out 2 characters that cost a 3 and a 4. Great trade right there, and a great way to really start to take control of this board. Now, of course, the Hiram is going to be questing for 1 as well, and right now we are down to 3 cards in hand, 4 cards in hand. And only a Maleficent on board. And Scrooge McDuck is one of the scariest cards that Sapphire has to offer, because yes, it only costs 4. It is a 5/5 with the ability to quest for 2. And that's very difficult to have to overtake, because most of the time that's going to mean that you're going to have to send in 2 characters to trade with the Scrooge McDuck, and that feels horrible. Otherwise, if you wait, he could possibly take control and attack anything that you have exerted, and what that also means is that he very well could also just, maintain board control, and slowly gain you more and more lore as the game continues to go on. And so it's just a very difficult situation for Mute to have to undertake here. So we'll see. And another Zeus is going to be coming out, absolutely decimating that Scrooge McDuck, not even allowing it to really get going, which is a great move on Mute's part. But still, that's now 2 of the Along Came Zeuses that we've seen. And sometimes they do run 3, so it's kind of tough to say how many that they have remaining, but there's a good chance that we might not see another one for the rest of this game, especially with only 2 cards in hand. But still, I mean, the Chernobog follower is going to be able to gain another card, and this is going to be a big turn for TommyDoo, because he's going to need to have to build up his board a little bit. And there is a Fire the Cannons that is going to be taking out the Maleficent. And it's like, necessarily, I mean, do I agree with that choice? Yes, it's a good choice. It stops the 2 lore, getting him up to 8. That's good. But at the same time, you see that your opponent has 2 cards in hand, and to stop the card draw and then just take out the Maleficent with your Hiram the following turn might necessarily be a little bit better in this case. But still, at the same time, the momentum has been shifted a little bit. Even though Lawrence is coming out, which feels pretty good, that's still a very difficult situation for, TommyDoo to find himself in here. And so, I mean, again, that kind of exchange that you need to consider with yourself. What kind of lines do I end up taking? What do I end up doing? And at the same time, what's interesting too is we saw that, Mute decided not to go and pop the Chernobog followers to be able to gain a card, which is a very interesting choice as well. Actually kind of surprised by that, but hey, that's if you can continue to quest more and get further and further ahead, why not? But again, that's the risk that you're going to be able to take, and you're almost encouraging the Hiram to go into it. If the Hiram goes into it, then the Lawrence can take it out, and you're also sitting pretty well, because you're also stopping them from ever generating their card draw again. And so that's going to be probably the thought process of Mute, which is also a very viable line for him to be able to take as well. And so with a vision of a future, TommyDoo is able to add 1 card in hand to be able to get this option going. And hopefully he was able to find something that he needed, because this game could very quickly move out of reach for TommyDoo. And that's what happened last time, and we do not want that to happen again. And so it looks like another Along Came Zeus manages to lightning bolt the situation, as the Hiram then goes ahead and takes out and clears Mute's board. And, that's going to be scary. But another Lawrence just ends up coming out onto the board. And, Mute very well could just say, hey, here we go, and pass. But it looks like he's going to be playing, instead a Friends on the other side to draw 2 cards after inking another card, going up to 6 ink, and having soon to be 3 cards in hand at the start of his next turn. And so right now, though, it seems like we're at a little bit of a standoff where both players are taking care of each other's boards fairly efficiently. But right now, the momentum is going to be shifting here sooner rather than later. And absolutely, that Tinkerbell is going to be putting in work right there. It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do to be able to take care of that. And I'm curious to see what might be happening. And so it's going to be tough to say, but this is going to be a good move for them. But Mute is going to have to build up his board a little bit, but at the same time now, if the Tinkerbell does take out the Lawrence, the thing to keep in mind, then it'll be able to deal 2 damage to another character, and that's going to be interesting to be able to have to handle. Now, at the same time, they're going to just be popping one of the brooms that they played to be able to instantly draw another card. And go from there, playing a Pete, so no actions can be played. Now, this is a tough decision. Do I pop the broom, get no lore, but be able to, draw another card to be able to utilize? And looks like that's not the case just yet. He's going to be playing another Maleficent and really built up his board in that one turn, because the odds of seeing another Tinkerbell is pretty slim. And even so, everything would survive except for the Maleficent. And so 2 cards in hand for TommyDoo, and a difficult situation for him to find himself in, as the board just went very wide with no actions to be played. But even so, a Gantu coming out, being able to quest for 4 as a 4/3. Ooh, that's a bit of a dangerous board to build. And man, can that Gantu absolutely put in work. If it only quests even once, it's going to get you a fifth of the way to victory. That's a big deal. You're only going to need 10 lore after a quest. And even Tinkerbell being able to quest for 2. Now, the hard part for TommyDoo is that if he does end up questing with anything, there's a very good chance, there's a slim chance that things will be able to get taken out with it. So, because at the same time, Pete's the only one that necessarily has any viable attack power. And so it really feels like the Tinkerbell is actually going to be safe here. So yeah, that's a good quest. I believe that would be a good quest. Going up to 8 lore. Now, Bute's going to have a good situation here to continue to get things moving. Hopefully he drew a character, and he did, being able to draw a card off of Rabbit, but he's opting to still keep in the broom here. And he very well could have quested and then popped it after the fact when he played the Rabbit and drawn 2 cards. Especially now that we know that he has only the 1 card in hand from the Rabbit. And so, right there, we see a Pete singing a Strength of Raging Fire to deal 5 damage to the Tinkerbell, taking it out. Now, that feels pretty good. And looks like everything else is then going to quest to go up to 12. And I mean, Gantu then is going to make it an even game. Now, at the same time, at that point, then you're going to pretty much expect that the Pete is going to trade into the Gantu. And while that doesn't feel good, you're going to at least try to deal with it. Because if you can take out the Pete, then you should be in a much better spot in this case to be able to take care of the situation of the board state better. And so TommyDoo right now, though, only has 2 cards in hand. That's tough, and he's going to be inking a Sail the Azurite Sea to go for 7 to play a dime. A lucky dime it is. And man, a lucky dime that is absolutely going to come in clutch, tapping it to gain 4 from Gantu. Oh my gosh, that is a lot to gain. And now at the same time, next turn, game is threatened because he's going to be able to go for 8 just with Gantu alone and lucky dime. So as long as he doesn't quest with it, and as long as there's no answers from, or any removal from, Mute, then this game is going to be pretty much secured by the magnitude that Gantu is able to quest with. I mean, that is just a high threat on the board. And with it being in the ready position, the only way to take it out is by an action in hand. So that is a difficult situation. So yep, he is going to go ahead and quest for 1 with the broom. So he has a character in hand. And he's going to be playing a Calhoun to pop the broom, draw a card. Is it the answer that he necessarily needs? No, it's a Diablo. And unfortunately, nothing can really go in. The Rabbit won't be taken out by the Hiram. And so it might be just a little too late, unfortunately. Otherwise, like, the Calhoun would have been able to go in with the Pete to be able to gain 2 after taking out the Hiram. But that would very well be next turn, which is going to be far too late. But man, that lucky dime and Gantu combo is coming in absolute clutch right about now. And why this deck can be so scary in the late game. I mean, in a matter of a turn, you thought that it was a neck and neck game, and then just like that, TommyDoo sweeps in and just absolutely takes control of the game and says, "Guess what? I'm gonna have it." And there you have it. Both players are scooping up, and it looks like TommyDoo is gonna take game 2. All right, both players are shuffled and ready to go into game 3. Now, right now, Mute is going to be opting into going first, and rightfully so. That's going to be a big advantage for him because, again, your opponent here, TommyDoo, especially with his deck style, necessarily won't have a whole ton of answers in the early game. Gonna maybe go Popsicle or things like that, Fortisphere, to be able to get things moving, then hopefully some Ramp with a answers like that. But instead, he's going to be going with a Fire the Cannons to immediately remove the Maleficent. I mean, that feels good. Stopping your opponent in their tracks, not even giving Maleficent a chance to get going. And so right there, a Chernobog follower is going to be coming out for Ink, followed by a Smee, another great threat, being able to quest for 2 as a 3/3, taking 1 damage every turn that you don't have a captain on. Note, Gantu is a captain. I keep forgetting that when I play him. But it looks like a Smee's for Smee. And that's the hard part, especially if you're a player who's playing Smee second. Trading into a Smee does not feel good because the Smee in question was able to then quest for the 2. Meanwhile, you are not able to. And so trading into a Smee that already has 1 damage on it, that already has done the quest for 2, hurts. Like that just feels like you're not getting a lot of value for your Smee as well, which can be very difficult to have to deal with. And I mean, right now though, if you don't do that or you don't have another Fire the Cannons, for example, what do you end up doing there? And it looks like a Pete's going to be coming out right there. He very well might be then allowing then the Smee to quest and then the Pete to do the dirty work and take out the Smee after a quest again. But I mean, that's still just such a difficult situation to have to be in, especially inking the Popsicle. I mean, he might have a couple of cards that are uninkable in hand, including like a Scrooge that might have, filled up his hand of something that might not be able to be inkable. We also have not seen a Sail the Azurite Sea to try to get his ramp going, and that could be a little bit dangerous, but the Smee is going to be questing up to 2/2 and taking 1 damage as well. And so in that case, it could be a White Rose going into the Smee, and then the Smee questing for 2 more, and then the Pete going into the Smee. And I mean, that's a lot of work that those characters just put in. And it really feels like that Mute's going to have the advantage of that. And it's because, he really went first and got to build up his board that much sooner. And I mean, that's why going first in this game is such a powerful move. And so this is going to be a big deal to try to get some control under his belt. And, at the same time, though, TommyDoo is missing out on some of his ramp. He was at least able to play a Pete, stopping any and all actions from being played. But at the same time, that's a tough situation to be in. Still, the Smee is going to be going in for the quest, followed by a Fox bouncing back and going into the Smee and just taking it out just like that with a trade. And, is a White Rose then going to quest and gain another lore? Because it looks like the Smee is all said and done, and he is going to be in as Ink. And you debating, do I quest or do I not? And yep, it looks like he's going to quest for the 1 lore, going up 6-2. TommyDoo falling behind by 4 now, with Mute having 3 cards in hand. So this is going to be a very difficult situation here. The board state, though, is going to be empty with the opportunity for TommyDoo to build up his board state. And so I'm curious to see what TommyDoo is going to be able to do here. Inking a Hiram. Does he have a Hiram in hand? He's going to be playing a Popsicle. They draw another card. Now at the same time, he's been struggling a little bit with Ink. But the Sail the Azurite Sea, Fortisphere, now that's 2 items that he's used for Ink. That otherwise would add 2 more cards to hand. That's tough. And at the same time, this is going to be a ramping turn, and then giving the board state to be rebuilt back to back to Mute, and instead he's going to be opting into going ahead and questing for one and saying, hey, if you want, you could go ahead and attack it and miss out on the ink. I'm going to quest. And so it looks like instead, though, the White Rose is going to be singing, and that might have been a little bit of a mistake right there from TommyDoo, because he just gave his opponent 2 cards through song. And that means that now his opponent has 5 ink to play with absolutely losing out on nothing. That's scary. As a rabbit then comes out, drawing another card. And then to follow up, another Maleficent. Now keep in mind, we have seen a Tinkerbell coming out each turn at this point in the game, and that very well could take out a Maleficent as well, and that would be absolutely detrimental. Now, is that going to be an option this time? It looks like not. Instead, the Hiram is going to be coming out drawing 2 cards. And this time, though, is the Pete going to then trade in to the White Rose? And that's the hardest part, because that's the risk and reward of the game that you have to play here. It's like, do you dare trade in and try to get better control of your board state while, yes, you have an empty board, your opponent gets the chance to rebuild. At the same time, though, just like we saw, though, they then would not have been able to sing that Friends on the other side. And that 2-card difference could very well be the shifting tide here for the rest of this game, and something that aids Mute into ultimately taking this game. And so I'm going to be curious to see what's going to be happening, and it looks like we are going to be visioning the future to sail the Azurite Sea, to continue to get some building of the Inkwell going. And if Tommy does so choose, he is going to be able to ink a second card in the ready position, at least in the face-up position as well. And it looks like a Captain Hook is going to be coming out for that ink and having 1 ink left. Now, at the same time, does the Pete go ahead and trade? That's going to be a very difficult situation and an option to make. I do think in this case, though, the Pete needs to go ahead and get rid of that White Rose. I think it should have done that last turn, just to stop, any actions from being sung. It can't sing a Zeus necessarily, but I mean, like we've seen, there are just other actions that could be very valuable, such as, that song of Friends on the Other Side. But in this case, he still opts to go ahead and gain the lore and going 6-4 with Mute only being ahead by 2. So that's a little bit scary. And right now, there's only 3 cards in hand for TommyDoo, which is still some pretty good utilization. But at the same time, we're going to be able to quest at minimum for 4. And so it'll be really interesting to see what then is going to be able to do. And it looks like the White Rose is finally going to trade into the Pete and take care of that. Right now, only the Hiram is going to be out, but it looks like a Zeus is going to deal 5 damage to Hiram. And then we're going to go ahead and see an Elsa to finish off the final damage. As Elsa takes 1 herself, but man, that's a dominating turn, especially right there. Now Maleficent is going to be able to gain 2. And TommyDoo now has no cards out on the board. Meanwhile, Mute has 3. So it's like, how are you going to be able to take care of this board state? That's going to be the interesting thing to have to undertake here. Calhoun is going to be a great start, but again, 2 cards in hand. How much removal does Mute potentially have here? That's going to be something to keep in mind. So we'll see. This is a scary situation. So, oh man, but right now, I mean, the momentum seems to be shifting over into Mute's hands, but still along came Zeus going into a Maleficent. Yeah. Oh, no, never mind. Into the Elsa. Yep. Okay, I was about to say, if you're spending a 4 cost to go into a 1 cost like that, yes, that's nice. But taking out the Elsa, who is also evasive, is a much better option for that as well. Now, yes, your opponent is still going to be able to quest for 2. That is a big deal. But at the same time, the Calhoun at least is going to be able to gain 2 of that back. And still also be able to maintain the board. And so right then and there, Mute is going to be going ahead and questing for those 3, bouncing back the Maleficent for a Fox to go ahead and come out, and then playing a Maleficent again And then following up with a Diablo. Oh, so the board state just got a lot wider and a lot scarier compared to TommyDoo's 1. A Fortosphere is at least going to be played, getting him 1 card draw, and that could be a very big answer right there, as 6 is then played for, oh my gosh, that Tinkerbell, that is coming in absolute clutch right there, taking out both the Maleficent and the Diablo. Now, of course, the Diablo will be drawing 1 card, which is great. But still, it wasn't able to quest, which otherwise would have been a great answer. And then, yep, the rabbit is going to be taken out, drawing another card, and the opponent is going to be able to draw 2, or the opponent is able to gain 2. Sorry, gain 2 lore with the Calhoun ability. Now, of course, the fox is probably going to be trading into this just fine. At the same time, even a fire the cannons is going to take out the 1 damaged Calhoun right now. And that's the hard part. With Calhoun having a resist +1, if you have a fire the cannons, it kind of defeats the purpose because you're going to have to utilize both fire the cannons in order to take out 1 Calhoun. That hurts. And so it's going to be really interesting to see then how we are going to be able to deal with this board state. And it looks like a broom is going to be coming out, followed by something. Followed by a strength of a raging fire, going on to dealing 2 damage to a Calhoun, clearing it from the board and mitigating a little bit of the risk. Now, at the same time, again, if the Tinkerbell does banish anything, then there is a good chance that it deals 2 damage to any other character of choice, which can be absolutely devastating because 2 damage is a lot in this game. And so 3 is like the best number for this. Ooh, and a magic dime coming down. Gonna head and gain 2 more off of the Tinkerbell. That's a pretty big turn. And at the same time, the fox necessarily can't go ahead and take out the Tinkerbell yet, but still, he's not going to risk it. The scariest part, though, about not questing with your Tinkerbell is there is so much removal in steel that you got to be so weary of the risk and reward of that. And oh, there it goes right then and there. The Elsa is going to be exerting the Tinkerbell just like that. Then he is going to be not bouncing yet. Instead, going into with both Elsa and the fox to take out Tinkerbell. The fox is going to trade in, and so is the Elsa in that case. Or is the Elsa going to trade in? I didn't think that. Or the Elsa has 5. So the Elsa will have 1 damage left. Yep, good call. Good. Way to do that. And so it's going to have 1 damage left to give. So if another Tinkerbell ends up coming out, then it is going to destroy the Elsa there. And then we are going to be questing for 1 with still 2 cards in hand for Mute. Now the board state is absolutely gone with TommyDoo, but still 5 cards with a Visions of the Future is going to be some help in the right direction. So he found 1 card that he needs. And yep, it's going to be a Tinkerbell dealing that 1 final damage to take out the Elsa and deal 1 damage to the broom. Now, luckily, it's not going to be able to attack into the broom because it still has, it's still drying, as they call it here in Lorcana. And so it'll still be able to quest for 1 and draw a card once they play another character. And so Mute, deep in thought, trying to figure it out. Is it going to be able to do so? I mean, he's up by 4. That's pretty good, especially once you start getting later into the game. But still, Lucky Dime is going to at least be able to gain 4 potentially. So, I mean, this board state and the turn this will take to develop this board for Mute is going to be absolutely vital to be able to get ahead here. And so, yes, he is going to quest with the broom. And then he is going to play as me, bouncing and being able to draw a card. Now, that is going to be a good turn because that's going to be able to get him up to 15 this next turn unless there's some sort of answer. And then a Calhoun coming out onto the board. That's not too shabby either because that, with the help of the Smee, if anything, can at least gain the lore needed. Or if the Smee quests and the Calhoun decides not to attack and then Tinkerbell goes into it, that's 4 lore that will be gained. And, Smee and Calhoun will both be taken out, but then you're going to be at 17 to 10. And so now the tough part, do you quest? with the Tinkerbell. And it's like, in this case, because the Tinkerbell, if it does take out the Smee, if the Smee decides to quest this next turn, it'll be able to deal 1 damage to the Calhoun or 2 damage to something else. And so, yep, it does look like he is going to quest for 2. There is a 1 lore deficit here, 13-12. This game could go either way, and the Lucky Dime could very well put in work, guaranteeing, I mean, heck, if a Gantu comes out, then that's going to be 4 going up to, 16, and then that's game with what's on board. But because he quested with the Tinkerbell, he does not have a Gantu in hand. Otherwise, he would not have quested with the Tinkerbell, because that would have been game next turn and he would have secured that. And so that's the kind of deduction and stuff that you can have, especially with going into game 3. You already know a good portion of your opponent's decks, so that's the kind of thing that you're trying to decide what your opponent is going against here. And so it's a difficult situation to still be in. This is a very close game, and that Lucky Dime is going to be so difficult to have to play around, because one correct draw and this game is completely over and gonna be in TommyDoo's favor. At the same time, heck, if even a Fire the Cannons comes out, I mean, that's going to be absolutely great, because you're going to be able to deal the 2 damage to Tinkerbell. Ooh, and a Strength of the Raging Fire is going to be able to deal 3 damage to Tinkerbell. And then the Calhoun is going to take it out and gain 2, going up to 15. And then right there, the Smee is going to be going up to 17, and there is 1 turn on board right now. And I mean, that is going to be an interesting board state. Now, what does TommyDoo have in hand? He has 1 card, and that was the card that he top decked. And it is going to be a Fire the Cannons to take out the Smee. And he's going to be able to gain 4 with the Scrooge McDuck. So it's going to be 17-16. This top deck is going to be vital for Mute right here. It could go either way. If he's able to find the answer and take care of Scrooge McDuck, then he's going to be able to win this. But if not, woo. But it is anyone's game right now, and that Lucky Dime right now has been putting in work for TommyDoo. He goes up to 18. Doesn't have enough for like a goat. Oh no! He shows his hand. And he shows that he has no answers, unfortunately, and is going to be scooping up, giving TommyDoo the win and the match. Man, that was absolutely thrilling and just awesome to be able to see. And you get to see the magnitude that Sapphire Steel gets to play against these meta decks. Now, is Sapphire Steel necessarily a tier 1 deck? Not necessarily, but right now, we got to see that TommyDoo had what it took to be able to go ahead and gain some great advantage. That Lucky Dime coming in absolute clutch. Both games that TommyDoo was able to win, and just being absolutely a game changer when it comes to winning. That Gantu Dime play, ooh, just absolutely intense and dominating. Being able to get things done so much faster, and your opponent just literally can sit there and do nothing. It's like Gantu's going to be doing work and getting things done. And I mean, that's at the same time, you just did an absolutely great job being able to mitigate the board presence, being able to handle anything that TommyDoo did throw at him. But at the same time, in the end, unfortunately, he did end up falling short and losing the match. But I mean, heck, he had an absolutely great gameplay, a thrilling match, great decision making, and just unfortunately managed to fall a little bit short to TommyDoo. But guys, this is such an exciting matchup. I'm so glad that you guys were able to join me for this. We have so much more exciting things coming your way and other games to be able to look forward to. Go ahead and give us a subscribe and a follow. And if you want to join the league, go ahead down to the Discord. You are able to do so. Go ahead and grab the League Night and the self-roll, and then go sign up in the League section of the Discord in order to do so. It's so great to have you guys here. Thank you so much for participating in this league if you are one that is watching. And until next time, we'll see you then. Have a good one.